The mall food court pulsed with mid-afternoon noise, clatter of trays, hiss of fryers, dull hum of distant conversation. Amidst it, at a corner table beneath the flickering glow of a malfunctioning light, sat an old man eating slowly, methodically. His sandwich, plain and half-eaten, rested on a napkin beside a nearly empty paper cup. He wore a Desert Tan military jacket, sun-bleached and threadbare at the elbows, a faint insignia on the shoulder nearly lost to time, a falcon, mid-dive, talons extended. His beard, gray and patchy, framed a face weathered by more than years, eyes distant, fixed on something far beyond the food court's bland walls. Two teenagers, barely 16, stood a few feet away. One leaned on a crutch of bravado, the other echoing his cruelty with hollow laughter. "Cool costume, Colonel, good will give that away with a bag of chips," the first boy smirked, pointing at the jacket. The other snorted. "Bet he thinks he's G.I. Joe or something." Their laughter bounced off the polished tile, sharp and misplaced. Several heads turned. No one intervened. A couple with a stroller veered away. The man at the table didn't flinch. He chewed slowly, eyes still on the horizon only he could see. "Seriously, does he think that rag makes him important?" one of the boys added, louder this time. "What, does he wear that to get free meals?" From the corner, the man's hand paused over his sandwich. For a moment, just one, his eyes flickered with something, pain or patience, it was hard to tell. Then he resumed chewing, unmoved by the mockery. Across the court, unnoticed at first, someone stood. Tall. Imposing. Wearing dress blues sharp as a drawn blade. Gold insignia gleamed from his collar. And he was walking toward them. Henry Dawson had once known silence of a very different kind. Not the dull indifference of a food court, but the taut, ringing hush inside a helicopter minutes before hell broke loose. His call sign had been Spectre 2, flying under moonless skies in the unforgiving terrain of Kandahar, Afghanistan. His Black Hawk had run silent, no lights, minimal chatter, hugging the dark like a second skin. He remembered the mission clearly. He always did. They were meant to extract a forward scout team pinned against a rocky outcrop. The intel was sketchy, but time was tight. A 6-man squad cornered by advancing insurgents with only a satellite ping for coordinates. They went in anyway, because that's what they did. No arguments, no hesitations. Just green lights and go. As commander of that bird, Henry was responsible for more than the flight plan. He bore the lives of his crew, the evac team, and the souls they'd been sent to retrieve. It was near the extraction zone, less than 30 meters from wheels down, when everything detonated. An RPG slammed into their rear rotor. The sound was deafening, like God had snapped his fingers inside Henry's skull. The bird twisted mid-air, tail screaming, before crashing belly first into the rocky basin below. Flames chased metal as fuel ignited. The gunner, Anderson, was pinned under twisted bulkhead. Specialist Renner, his co-pilot, had a jagged sliver of rotor casing embedded in his thigh. The screams were distant at first, lost behind the ringing in Henry's ears. But then they sharpened, real, human, and close. He pulled himself free first. Arm dislocated. 2 ribs cracked. But adrenaline made you forget those things. Fire licked the interior. The smell, melting plastic, burning oil, blood, would haunt his dreams for years. He got to Anderson first. Dragged him with a broken seatbelt strap as a makeshift sling. The man screamed when his leg was yanked, but he was alive. Then came Renner. Henry didn't even register the pain as he lifted him clear, muscles shredding under the strain. Only when all 3 of them were behind a nearby boulder, shielded, breathing, did Henry slump forward, unconscious. They called him a hero, of course. Medal ceremonies, polished speeches, photos he never looked at again. But Henry never cared about medals. The only thing that mattered was that all 3 of them made it home. Anderson lost the leg. Renner had a permanent limp. Henry? He walked out with scars too deep for doctors. His discharge was honorable. He didn't fight it. After 22 years, 3 combat deployments, and a laundry list of injuries, there was nothing left to prove. They offered him desk work, command at a training post, even liaison for a defense contractor. He said no to them all. Instead, he moved out of state. Found a 2-room apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Grew a beard. Lived alone. He didn't want to be thanked or pitied. He wanted silence. Real silence. The jacket, well, that came with him. It was the last one issued to him, the only one that survived the crash, the one he wore that night. He never washed it. The scorch mark on the right shoulder was from the cockpit fire. The faded insignia, that diving Falcon, belonged to Falcon Watch, a subgroup within the 160th SOAR that handled deep recon support missions. They weren't flashy. They didn't make headlines. But they flew low, fast, and deadly accurate. Most people had never heard of them. That was the point. Every so often, he'd wear the jacket to run errands. Not to boast, but because the desert tan felt familiar. Like armor. It reminded him who he used to be, even if the world no longer seemed to care. Then came that day at the mall. He hadn't planned on stopping. But he'd skipped breakfast, and the smell of fried potatoes had pulled him in. He sat with his sandwich, tucked into the corner like he always did, watching the bustle of people who moved around each other but rarely looked each other in the eye. And then, those boys. He knew their type. Not cruel by nature, maybe. But careless. Unchecked. Raised on sarcasm, taught little about honor, reverence, or humility. They didn't understand the language of service, the weight of memory. To them, a uniform was just cloth. War was a video game. He didn't react. Not at first. Not because he was weak. But because he knew better. Words tossed around like trash could cut deep, but only if you let them. He'd faced real fire. Survived real judgment. 2 teenagers mocking a jacket didn't compare. But it wasn't the insult that haunted him, it was the silence. The others who watched, heard, and did nothing. A mother pulling her daughter away. A group of men pretending not to hear. Eyes sliding off his figure like he didn't belong in the story of their afternoon. That's what wounded most, not the boy's ignorance, but the world's forgetfulness. And then, that voice. Crisp. Measured. Commanding. Stand up straight, cadets. Henry lifted his eyes just enough to catch the first glint of dress blues walking through the tables. The sound of the words didn't come from a mall cop or a passerby. They had weight. Authority. Like words used to have in his world. The man approaching moved with purpose. Not fast, but unshakable. Tall, clean-shaven, posture impeccable. His shoes shined bright. Insignia gleamed on his chest like battle stars aligned. Henry knew before the man reached the boys, officer. High-ranking. Combat-tested. The kind who didn't just wear command, he embodied it. A small ripple passed through the food court. Heads turned now. Forks paused mid-air. Even the teens sensed the shift. Their expressions faltered, replaced by something rare, uncertainty. Henry set his sandwich down and waited. This wasn't his war anymore. But someone else had just stepped onto the battlefield. The taller of the 2 boys stiffened as the man in dress blues stopped a breath away. The younger one shifted his feet, trying to decide whether to sneer or bolt. But neither spoke. The stranger's posture, shoulders squared, eyes locked, made one thing clear: this was not a man to mock. Stand up straight, cadets, he said again, voice low, firm. We're not cadets, the first boy muttered. You're acting like it, the man replied flatly. Around them, the food court hushed. Conversations faded. One man lowered his coffee cup with a soft clink. A child stared, mouth open. Then, trying to recover ground, the second teen snapped, "We didn't do anything wrong." The man's brow arched. Mocking a soldier who wore that jacket in combat isn't nothing. You insulted a man who gave more than you'll likely ever understand. How were we supposed to know? The first teen muttered. It's just a jacket. No, the man said. It's never just a jacket. Behind them, Henry Dawson hadn't moved. But his shoulders were no longer slack. His fingers, resting on the tray, had curled ever so slightly. A woman nearby whispered to her son. An older man glanced at the jacket, then away. He'd heard everything, but done nothing. The tall man broke his gaze with the teens and looked around. No one here thought to speak, he said. We all heard it. But silence is easy, isn't it? He let that hang. Somewhere along the line, we stopped teaching the difference between rights and reverence. The boy who'd started it all shifted. It was just a joke. The man studied him. You laughed at survival. Brotherhood. Pain. You laughed at the men who never made it home. Still, Henry remained seated. He'd faced fire, loss, and death. A boy's mockery couldn't wound him. But the man speaking now, that struck something deeper. The younger boy looked at him now, unsure. Is it real? He asked, quieter. Henry looked up, eyes sharp. He didn't speak. The silence was his answer. The man in dress blues turned slightly, revealing the crest on his sleeve, Naval Special Warfare Command. The collar insignia glinted, Admiral. Langston Reeve, he said. Chief of Naval Operations. Home to bury my father. He served in Korea. Wore a jacket not unlike that one. Different patch. Same soul. A ripple passed through the court. Some gasped. A phone clicked on, recording quietly. Reeve didn't flinch. You mocked a veteran. In front of civilians. You dishonored not just the man, but the silence he carries. And you reminded everyone here how fragile respect has become. The first boy's face flushed. The second opened his mouth, then closed it. Then a voice behind them, rasping, steady, cut through. They're just kids. Reeve turned. Henry stood slowly, joints stiff, but his back still proud. The jacket hung from him like ancient armor. They don't know what they don't know, he said. And no one's teaching them. His tone wasn't angry. It was weary. And that rang louder than any rebuke. Reeve approached, softened. Sir. Henry raised a hand. I'm no sir. Just Henry now. Reeve nodded once. Then stepped back and straightened. Then with your permission, Henry, I'd like to correct the record. Henry gave a slow nod. Reeve turned again. That falcon on his shoulder? That's Falcon Watch. Aerial recon, deep night support. They fly when no one else will. They find what no one else can. When things go bad, they're the ones who bring people home. He looked at the teens again. That emblem doesn't wear out. It burns into the man, into the mission. Henry's fingers trembled, but his face didn't change. Then Reeve turned back. In front of everyone, he drew to attention, heels together, spine straight, and delivered a flawless salute. The court went still. Henry hesitated. Then, slowly, he returned the salute. His fingers weren't steady, but the angle was perfect. I'm Major Henry Dawson, he said. Retired. 160th SOAR. Falcon Watch. A moment passed. And then, from near the smoothie stand, came a single clap. Then another. Then more. It grew, awkward at first, then steady. Not loud. But real. Respectful. The teens stood frozen, caught in a storm they hadn't expected. No more mockery. Only recognition. The clapping ebbed, not dying out but tapering into a respectful hush. Henry Dawson lowered his hand. His salute lingered in the air like smoke, delicate, fading, unforgettable. He sat back down without a word, reaching once more for his sandwich, now cold. He didn't lift it. He just rested his hands on either side of the tray, as if anchoring himself in the moment. Admiral Reeve remained standing. The boys hadn't moved. They were no longer just teenagers caught in a moment, they were witnesses to something deeper than they'd ever been asked to understand. The crowd hadn't returned to their routines. There was no laughter, no idle scrolling. The mall food court had been transformed, briefly, into a place of reverence. Then came a voice from the far end. I served in Nam. Mekong Delta. 1970. It came from the man in the hoodie and jeans, gray-haired, shoulders hunched, sitting 2 tables away. He stood slowly, unsure at first, then straighter. Didn't think it was my place to say something before. Should've. He turned to Henry. I see your jacket, brother. I see it. Henry met his eyes. A single nod passed between them. No rank, no medals, just recognition. Then a woman spoke up from the next row of tables. Her voice was quiet but firm. My father was in Desert Storm. Never talked about it much. But he had that look in his eyes, like you. I remember that. One by one, more voices joined in. Not a chorus, just threads weaving a tapestry of silence broken and made whole again. My sister was a corpsman. Lost 2 fingers in a field hospital in Kandahar. My husband flew Chinooks out of Bagram. My grandfather carried shrapnel until the day he died. Each statement was brief. Private made public. A dozen stories surfacing in the food court that had never had space to be spoken. All drawn out by one moment of confrontation, of defense, of truth. Admiral Reeve turned slightly, facing the gathered crowd. This is not about the military, he said. It's about memory. About the weight we carry, those who served, and those who waited. The jacket he wears isn't a relic. It's a scar. One you wear on the outside so the ones on the inside don't devour you. He let that settle. His voice softened. And if you're lucky, really lucky, someone sees it before it fades. Then, to the teens, this isn't to shame you. It's to teach you. You mocked something you didn't understand. That changes today. The boys nodded. Both of them. Not defensively now, not sullen. Just quiet. Still. Something had settled in them, a shift too subtle for words but too strong to ignore. Apologize, Reeve said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The older boy stepped forward first. His voice was tight. I'm sorry, sir. For what I said. I didn't understand. The younger followed, voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, too. For being cruel. Henry said nothing for a beat. Then, I've had worse. But I accept your apology. And that, somehow, was more powerful than any punishment could have been. Reeve glanced down at Henry. You want to say anything else? Henry leaned back in his seat, eyes on the boys. Just this, you'll meet people in this world who won't explain where they've been. Not because they don't want to. Because they can't. Some pain doesn't come with a caption. So don't assume. Don't laugh when you don't know what you're looking at. He paused. And when in doubt, shut up and listen. The teens nodded again. Then, quietly, they walked away, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The crowd parted for them like water. No jeers. No smirks. Just silence. The kind that comes after truth has rung. Reeve stepped closer to Henry's table. You handled that better than I would have. Henry gave a faint chuckle. You did fine. Reeve studied him. You sure you don't want that title back? Sir, fits you. Henry shook his head. I wore it long enough. I earned the right to lay it down. Another moment passed. Then Reeve gestured to the seat across from him. Mind if I sit? Henry nodded. The Admiral eased into the plastic chair, posture still straight but now at ease. He looked around the food court, then down at the old, cooled sandwich. You eat this every day? Henry smiled, just barely. Not the sandwich. But I come here. See the world pass by. Listen to stories. Catch glimpses of the people I used to be responsible for. Reeve nodded slowly. Funny how they blend in, isn't it? Soldiers, sailors, Marines. You see them at bus stops, behind counters, pushing shopping carts. War ghosts in peacetime clothes. Henry glanced down at his jacket. Sometimes I think I keep wearing it just to remind myself I didn't dream it all. Reeve's gaze was steady. You didn't. For the next few minutes, neither man spoke. They didn't need to. 2 lifetimes of service didn't require filler. Eventually, a worker from one of the food stalls approached, mid-30s, apron dusted with flour. He cleared his throat nervously. Sir, he asked, addressing Henry. Your lunch, it's on the house today. Manager's orders. Henry blinked. That's not necessary. I know, the man said. That's why it matters. He left the receipt on the tray and stepped away. Reeve looked at it, then back at Henry. You'll take it, won't you? Henry hesitated, then nodded. Just this once. They both smiled. Outside the court's windows, the sun had dropped slightly, casting amber light across the floor. The food court began to return to normal, slightly altered, but returning. Laughter crept back in, softened by what had just occurred. Conversations resumed with new gravity. But something had changed, undeniably. And in the corner table, an old soldier sat quietly, finally seen. Not because he asked to be. Because, for once, the world had paused long enough to look. The food court thinned as the afternoon wore on. The surge of attention had crested, receded, and left a quiet calm behind. A few patrons lingered, casting glances toward the corner table, where 2 men sat in stillness. Henry Dawson, retired major, wore his age like the fabric draped over his shoulders, faded, worn, but intact. Admiral Langston Reeve, polished in appearance but carrying a similar weariness, sat across from him. Neither spoke much. The need for words had passed. You know, Reeve said after a while, when I was younger, I thought rank meant people would listen more. Turns out, it just means they nod more before doing what they were always going to do. Henry smiled, faint but genuine. They never salute the man. Just the title stitched to his name. Reeve looked out across the court. But today, they saluted you. I don't think so, Henry replied. They saluted the story. The Admiral nodded thoughtfully. And what a story it must have been. Henry's hand drifted to the falcon patch on his sleeve. Still is. They sat for a moment, watching the world shift around them. Then, the Admiral leaned forward, elbows on the table. Tell me. What happened that night? The one that earned you the falcon. Henry looked away, as if studying the linoleum tiles. We were doing forward recon outside Kandahar. Black Hawk went down. Engine failure. Hit hard. Rolled through a ravine. He took a breath. My crew chief lost both legs. Co-pilot had shrapnel in his throat. The gunner was unconscious. I crawled out first. Smelled fuel. Everything was wet. He paused. I went back in. Pulled the chief first. Then the co-pilot. The bird caught fire before I got to the gunner. Flames blocked the hatch. I pulled the emergency exit door and dragged him out the side. Reeve said nothing. I didn't even know his name yet, Henry continued. We'd only flown twice together. He died 2 weeks later in Ramstein. Infection. A long silence stretched. That's why I wear the jacket, Henry added quietly. Not for what I did. For what I couldn't do. Reeve's jaw tightened. And you've carried that every day since. Guilt has a good memory. Reeve nodded, respectful. And still, you came back. Built a life. I tried, Henry said. Didn't always succeed. Lost my wife in '06. Cancer. Daughter moved east. Doesn't visit much. VA keeps me upright, barely. And this place, he gestured around them, it's company. I come here, watch people. Reminds me the world didn't end when my mission did. Reeve's eyes narrowed slightly. Would you change any of it? Henry looked surprised. Then he shook his head slowly. No. But I wish more people knew what it cost. The Admiral leaned back in his chair. Maybe now, a few more do. They were interrupted by a small voice. Excuse me. A girl, maybe 8, 9 years old, stood near the table, clutching a notebook and pen. Her mother hovered nearby, uncertain. Henry turned to the child. Hi there, he said. Are you a soldier? She asked, glancing at the patch on his jacket. I used to be. She hesitated, then held out the notebook. Can I have your autograph? Henry blinked. Reeve smiled. Why would you want my name? Henry asked, surprised. My grandpa was a soldier too, she said. He died before I was born. My mom said he was brave. You look like him. Henry glanced at the mother, who gave a sheepish nod. He took the pen, wrote slowly, carefully, to Ava. Remember the brave. Henry Dawson. The girl grinned, thanked him, then skipped away. She's going to remember that, Reeve said. Henry smiled, warmth behind his eyes. I hope she remembers what it meant. Not just who I am. Moments later, the teens returned. The same 2 boys. No longer mocking. No longer boys, even. Something had shifted. The older one approached with his phone in hand. Sir, he said nervously. I looked up Falcon Watch. I read about the Black Hawk crash in Kandahar. Was that you? Henry studied him. Most people don't bother looking. I didn't know what I was mocking. That's no excuse. But I read, you were awarded the Silver Star. Henry nodded slowly. I wanted to ask, do you still talk to the other guys from your unit? No, Henry said, not bitter, just final. One didn't make it. One won't talk about it. The last moved off-grid. Montana, I think. The teen hesitated. If I wanted to write something for school, about this, about you, could I interview you? Henry looked at him closely. Why? Because I think we forgot how to say thank you. I want to learn. Henry turned to Reeve. The Admiral gave a small nod. You show up here Thursday. 4 o'clock, Henry said. Bring real questions. I will, the teen said, and extended his hand. Henry shook it, firm, steady. They left. Henry looked down at his hands, then across the table. You think this makes a difference? He asked Reeve. Today? Yes, the Admiral replied. And not just to them. Henry nodded again, quietly. Good. They sat in silence, two soldiers decades apart, connected not by rank or mission, but by memory. Then Reeve stood. I have to go. Family dinner. Henry rose with him. The Admiral extended his hand. It was an honor, Major. Henry took it. Likewise, Admiral. Reeve drew back, gave one last salute, sharper than the first. Henry returned it, proud and still. As Reeve turned to leave, Henry sat once more. This time, he finally took a bite of his sandwich. It was cold. But for the first time in a long while, it tasted fine. Henry Dawson returned to the food court the next day. Same table. Same seat. Same jacket. But something had changed. The woman at the bakery stand greeted him with a warm, "Good morning, Major." A custodian, usually indifferent, offered a nod of respect. Even the teenage girl at the smoothie counter, always half lost in her earbuds, looked up when he passed and smiled, small and sincere. People had seen him. Not just the jacket. Not just the age or the stooped walk. Him. Henry eased into his seat and opened the small notebook he now kept in his jacket pocket. Blank pages. For years, he'd thought there was nothing left to say. Now, he wondered if the world had simply stopped listening, or if he'd stopped trying to speak. A soft cough drew his attention. It was the boy again, the one who had asked to interview him. Dressed a little neater this time. Backpack slung over one shoulder, a tablet tucked under his arm. Mind if I sit? The teen asked. Henry gestured to the chair. As long as you're not just here for a history assignment. I'm not, the boy said. This isn't for school. It's for me. He opened his tablet. A list of questions glowed on the screen. Start with the hardest one, Henry said, and don't sugarcoat it. The boy hesitated, then asked, what does it feel like, knowing you came home when others didn't? Henry didn't flinch. Like waking up with someone else's weight on your chest. Every morning. Every damn day. The teen swallowed. Do you ever stop feeling guilty? Henry shook his head. No. But eventually, you learn to live beside it instead of under it. They talked for over an hour. Henry spoke of things he'd never shared, not with his wife, not with the VA, not even with his own daughter. Not because he couldn't. Because he hadn't believed it would matter to anyone. And now, here was this boy, listening like it did. When the teen left, he shook Henry's hand again. Thank you, sir. I'm just Henry, the veteran replied. No, the boy said. You're more than that now. The next week, a short article appeared on a local blog, The Man in the Jacket. No last names. No medals. Just the story of a veteran sitting alone in a food court and how two foolish words, cool costume, had cracked open something bigger. It spread. Quietly, but meaningfully. By the end of the month, others had found their way to that corner table. A man who served in Fallujah. A retired Air Force mechanic. A woman whose brother had been a SEAL. Strangers who had passed each other for years began to recognize one another, to nod, to speak. Not loudly. Not for show. But honestly. And Henry, once just another old man in a worn-out jacket, became the unspoken center of it all. Not because he asked for it. Because he had endured long enough for the world to circle back around. 3 months later, Admiral Reeve returned. Not in uniform this time. Khakis, button-down shirt. The lines around his eyes had deepened. Henry was already at the table. Told you that jacket made you a landmark, Reeve said. Henry chuckled. Thought you were off burying your father. I was, Reeve replied. Now I'm just trying to be the son he'd have respected. Henry nodded. Tougher than any combat op. They talked like old comrades, catching up on nothing and everything. Then Reeve pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I'm not supposed to do this, he said. But someone pulled a few strings. He opened it. Inside, a military challenge coin. One side bore the insignia of Falcon Watch. The other, etched in bold, simple script, for the silence you carried. For the voices you awakened. Henry stared at it, throat working silently. He reached out, took the coin gently, reverently. Thank you. No, Reeve said. Thank you. They sat together until the lights of the court dimmed. The manager politely told them the mall was closing. Neither moved right away. Henry finally stood. He tucked the coin into the inner pocket of his jacket. Funny, he said. Wore this every day thinking it might keep the memories close. Never thought it might bring people closer. You gave them something to believe in, Reeve said. Something real. As they walked toward the exit, a security guard nodded to Henry. Evening, Major. He smiled. Didn't correct the title this time. Outside, the sky was soft with evening. The world kept turning. Cars passed. People talked. Life continued. But something lingered. Not the sound. Not the spectacle. The shift. Respect restored not by decree, but by example. By presence. By quiet defiance in the face of being forgotten. And somewhere deep in Henry's chest, something loosened. Not gone. But lighter. The boy returned each week, notebook in hand. Sometimes with more questions, sometimes with none at all. Sometimes they just sat in silence. Other kids came too. A girl whose dad had deployed twice. A boy who thought about enlisting but had no one to talk to. A middle schooler who just liked the stories. Henry became more than a veteran. He became a bridge. He began writing in the notebook. First to remember. Then to explain. And finally, to pass something on. The past, once buried, had found its breath again. The jacket never came off. And no one asked him to. Never forgotten.